New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Hey everybody, Tracy Brown here. So glad you have joined me for today's episode of The Inclusive Church, where we come together and remind ourselves that it is a part of our responsibility as well as a strong intention to build spiritual communities where oneness does not equate or require sameness. So this month, I've been focusing on young adults, right? This idea of more young adults, please, because so many places I go and so many leaders I talk to around the globe are concerned about bringing in and totally engaging people who are in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. And so we get an opportunity to focus on that this month. What are some things to think about? What are some things to remember? And what are some things to try? Now, if you are so inclined, I invite you to follow Anita's lead and say hello. And if you want to tell us where you're dialing in from or viewing from, that's great too. But even if you don't want to do either of those things, as we go through the next 25, 30 minutes, if you have examples that you want to share, or if you have questions you want to ask, please feel free to drop them into the comment section or the chat section, depending on which platform you are viewing from. So let's dive in. Today, the working title is Attendance or Belonging, or how do we move from simply having young adults attend an event or a Sunday service to actually experiencing or feeling like they are experiencing belonging? In other words, what are some things we need to keep in mind if we want to build communities where young adults actually want to join, want to be involved, want to be engaged, and want to call your church their home. So many churches actually focus a lot on attracting visitors, attracting new people of different age groups, different ethnicities, different identity groups, and don't invest enough energy in really helping people form genuine relationships. And with young adults, I'm to a certain degree with all age groups, but in this case, because we're focusing on people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, the younger the group is, the more important relationships are. Relationships are important to all of us, but if we are talking about bringing in and growing our communities of younger adults, then this genuine relationship needs to occur. With people who are in their 20s, we have to be really careful that we don't, if the majority of people in the congregation skew older, especially 60s, 70s, 80s, then we have to be really careful that the relationships that we are forming are not simply or not only a 20-year-old relating to their grandparents. Okay, just think about that, right? And so the relationship has to have some shared power, some shared value. And this is also why it's really hard to grow your young adult community if you only have one or two young adults, because they will develop relationship, and depending on their personalities, their interests, their employment, their profession, their education, they may or may not bond. But let's for this moment assume they bond. But then it's two people and they get each other, but they don't still feel like they belong in the larger community. So you want to invest in forming genuine relationships because people in every age group have insights to share. People in every age group have questions to ask. People in every age group have their own perspective about what's going on in the world today. And we can learn from each other, we can share with each other. And when we remember this, then it's not so much a focus on just recruiting people who are in their 20s or early 30s so they can come and be just like us. It becomes much more, what can we learn about being more relevant in the community? What can we learn or understand better about how values and ethics are shifting with all that's going on? What is it that we as an existing community can learn about new ways to use technology and to integrate what we do with different groups of people? The same holds true with older young adults, people who are from mid 30s to mid to late 40s. They're going to bring different perspectives. They're going to require us to take our spiritual teaching and guidance and apply it to different life situations than the people who have been in the community a long time, or the people in our community who are between the ages or who are 60 and above. So it does require us to do more than just invite. It really does require us to invite with intention and to invite in a way that also makes it clear that we are welcoming an opportunity to learn more about what is desired, what is required, what is expected, what is needed, what is meaningful for the people we are inviting. In this sense, this is the same as it would apply to any specific identity group we were seeking to expand with, whether it be age, religion, race and ethnicity, language being spoken, sexual orientation, gender identity, all of those and so many more. We would need to be very clear that there is a requirement for those of us already in the community to be willing to learn something new and also be willing to transform the way that we do classes, transform the content and the flow of our Sunday service, transform the examples we use when we are speaking or when we are building relationship. Because if we didn't need to transform, we would already have that targeted group in our community. A desire to change is also comes with a requirement to change. Okay, so when we think about the whole idea of finding some balance between inviting people and creating genuine relationships, we do also need to realize that young adults often decide whether they belong or not before they decide whether they agree with the theology. So, of course, in New Thought, we're going to be inviting based on our beliefs and our values and what we teach in New Thought and a metaphysical approach to life and living. And with many young adults, that will bring them in the door, but it won't make them stay unless the relationships are also beginning to develop. So I'm going to share with you what I believe are some of the biggest mistakes that our communities make in this regard, and also maybe 4 or 5 suggestions of what would be opportunities. And then I'll have a few closing comments. So the biggest mistakes that we make, and I think, in attracting visitors in general, and especially if we're looking at people between the ages of 25 and 45. So many of our churches greet visitors without any thought given to how do we integrate this visitor into our community. And there's a very fine line that we have to walk, because I know I've been a visitor at different churches and they've come on so strong that I'm like, yeah, no, how fast can I get out of here? Because they're just all over me, or they're bombarding me with too much information or too many invitations. I'll walk into a predominantly white church, and yes, I'm glad that people will welcome me, greet me, maybe ask me a couple of questions, pretty standard questions. Oh, how did you find us? Or, those are questions we all ask. And I've been in a few situations where right away they're saying, well, we have this group and I'd love it if you would join that group. Or we have this program coming up in a couple of weeks. And, I really hope you'll come back to it. And they don't really know anything about me and what I'm really interested in. And it's just like, oh, you're a visitor. And oh, we've been wanting more Black people. Let me see how I can get you involved right away. So it's a very fine line, right? You do want to provide opportunities for people to plug in and for your young adults to see that there are opportunities, but you don't want to bombard them because they haven't made a commitment yet. So it's a big mistake when we greet visitors without doing anything to integrate them, but it's also a big no-no if we greet visitors and we overwhelm them with information without engaging in some kind of conversation, or that in our form that people fill out so they can get on the mailing list, that maybe there's some options there, 6 or 7 or 8 things that happen regularly, so they know and they could check for more information about the weekly meditation group, or they could check if they want more information about the young adult program that you have, or they could check that they are really interested in community service or community outreach, so you know what information to begin to plug them into. Big mistake number 2, assuming everyone wants Sunday morning to be the central focus for their church or spiritual community. The younger the young adult is, the least likely they are going to want to design their engagement with your church around Sunday morning service. So this is not just for New Thought. This is a trend that's been demonstrated over and over again in Christian churches, in Judaism, and so it's not unique to us, but it is very true to our experience in New Thought as well. And so if you are serious about wanting to expand the participation and engagement of young adults in your church, then you need to be prepared to either offer things that they can participate in other than Sunday, and or that you invite them to participate in describing and designing the ways that they would like to engage. So I'm familiar with young adult groups that they have a weekly meeting, or they prefer a weekly session on a Wednesday evening or a Friday evening, because in this age group, they are often in school or working at jobs where they may or may not have a lot of flexibility time-wise. You want to have topics that are of interest, which means you have to talk to some young adults about what topics are interesting to them. And that may feel very different. But if you're serious, you want to create a space that is the kind of space that they want to be in. A little non-traditional goes a long way with your 20 and 30-year-olds especially. Number 3, a big mistake, and I've observed it so many times, and every time it makes me sad. Talking at young adults instead of listening to them or talking with them. talking at them, telling them what they should be thinking, what they should be worried about, what you read about in an online magazine or article, and then you've assumed that that's their concern as well. So it needs to be where I'm listening to my young adults, the young adults in my community, and really asking questions. What is it that you need? How do you think spiritual principles could help you navigate? What is it that's challenging in your life right now, that you believe or that you would appreciate understanding more about spiritual practice and how it applies? And big mistake number 4, creating programs without asking younger people to help design them. So I kind of wrap that in with number 2, assuming everyone wants a Sunday morning. No, you got to talk to people to find out what they really want to do instead. And so that's the number 4. And maybe you don't have many young adults in your community. So how do you get input from younger people to help design them? So you do some internet-based research if you can. You talk to the young adults you know who may not even be in your spiritual community. I'm smiling because I was working on a project with a specific church, and it was related to younger adults. In this case, they were targeting people who were in their 30s, and they didn't have anyone in their community. So I asked everybody who was in the leadership of this church that we're in the next week, anyone they came into contact with at work, in the grocery store, if they were willing to walk up to a stranger, or to the cashier, to anyone who they thought might be in anywhere from late 20s to early 40s, and not ask them their age, but to actually say, my church is really interested in carving out a space that's meaningful to young adults. And if you were going to design a program or create a program, what would you include in it? And then I actually did the same thing, and I gave myself an assignment that I would talk to 20 people in the next week, strangers. And the thing that was interesting is this: I didn't need to know what religion or what spiritual belief system the person I was talking to were a part of. I didn't need to know if they identified themselves as spiritual but not religious. I didn't need to know if they attended a Pentecostal Christian traditional church, because all I wanted to hear were the kinds of things that would attract them to join or to be a part of or to even just attend a spiritual community. And there was a pattern that actually mirrored what some of the research has said. Over and over again, many people said to me and to the other leaders in this particular church, we heard over and over again that they didn't want to go sit in a stuffy church service with music and someone preaching at them. Over and over again, we heard examples of spiritual practice, meditation especially, but also We heard people saying that for them, running was their spiritual practice because it got them quiet and grounded, and, or being in nature, taking a hike and being in nature, that came up a lot. Many people shared that, many of the young people shared that they did not consider themselves religious, but they were very spiritual. And when asked, so what kind of, is that just individual practice, or what kind of group would help you deepen your spiritual understanding? And they would say, oh, I would love to have a group of 10 or 12 people that we met on a regular basis and we talked about the spirituality and how we use our spirituality in our lives. So we got the same suggestions no matter what religion or not religion people identified. And that allowed that church to begin to create 2 or 3 things that a year and a half to 2 years later resulted in them having a really solid group of a couple dozen people who were in their 30s, in late 20s into late 30s, that were meeting on a regular basis and receiving guidance from the minister and from other leaders, but they were not being stuck in the only way they could participate was coming on Sunday morning. Some of you have heard me share before at my spiritual home community in Dallas that we have a young adult group now, but a few years ago we had a young adult group, and they decided they wanted to meet on Saturdays for brunch, right? That they had jobs all during the week, and on Friday night, they either wanted to rest or they wanted to go out and party with their friends. And, but Saturday brunch would be a great time to meet. And they had brunch and mimosas. Brunch and mimosas once a month, twice a month. I'm not remembering now whether they met more frequently. I think they met more frequently than once a month. But it was brunch and mimosas, and they took turns, like who would bring the food for lunch, for brunch, but always mimosas. So champagne and orange juice, and obviously, if you didn't drink alcohol, you could have orange juice. And sometimes they would bring other things as well. But it was fabulous, and they chose the topics, but it was always a topic like, how do we, this is a challenge, and how can understanding spiritual truth or spiritual practice help us navigate this very common challenge that we have as young adults. And it was great. It was great and went on for a long time. COVID, of course, had an impact on the group as it did with everything else. So, 4 big mistakes: greeting visitors without integrating them, or greeting them and inundating them or overwhelming them with ways that they should be involved. Number 2, assuming that Sunday morning service is the most important or most attractive offering. 3, talking at them instead of with them and listening. And 4, making sure that their voices are in the lead, or at least are providing valuable input. When we don't do that, we're making a big mistake. So what are some things that you can do? I've woven some of these into what I've already shared. Peer-led discussion groups. Maybe number 1 of the 5 I'm going to share with you. peer-led discussion groups. Now, this does not mean that you don't have someone older or someone with great experience, because it's not a social, it is social, but it's not a social group as the primary thing. It is social, and you are encouraging the building of relationships, but you do need a minister or a practitioner or a licensed unity teacher, someone who is actually going to make sure that there's some spiritually based, metaphysically sound education and application. But that does not mean that that is the person or those are the people who are running the group or deciding all the topics. So peer-led discussion groups, service projects. Research shows over and over again that people who are in their 20s now and into their mid-30s are very much driven by wanting to give back, wanting to be in service, and wanting to do that with a group of people. So when you can combine, or when you can integrate a commitment to spiritually guided living with a commitment to serve in the community, then you have a win-win. Number 3, intergenerational mentoring. Now, this is different from just having older people define what younger people need to know. And the mentoring needs to be both ways. That there's wisdom, there are insights, there are perceptions, there are applications of spiritual principle where the young can learn from the older and the older can learn from the younger. Number 4, having spiritual practice circles. So there are a lot of young adults who want to enhance their life with spiritual practice, or they want to go deeper than they have before or than they have been able to do on their own. And so if you have a group that, or if you host a group that comes together to meditate every Thursday evening at 6:30 p.m., you are likely to attract a number of young adults. If you have a drum circle and you're integrating spiritual concepts in, plus drumming in itself is a great spiritual practice, depending on how you guide it and lead it, then have a hosted drum circle on the third Sunday afternoon of every month. And obviously reach out to and market to different audiences. Okay, peer-led discussion groups, service projects, spiritual practice circles or groups, intergenerational mentoring, and social gatherings that are not fundraising events. So I know of a church that they do a social gathering for members of their community, and they vary it. They do it at like once a month, and they go to different places and they do different things. So it might be a hike one week, and whoever leads the hike, they go on to a nature trail. And yes, how you plan it might be a little different than you would if it was just your personal friends or people you work with. But right, if you started with some spiritual practice, a reflection, a devotional, or you give people something to contemplate while they're hiking, and then at the end you gather and you have some discussion, or maybe you go to lunch together, I don't think I would necessarily, well, depend on how strenuous the hike is. I guess that's the key. Bowling. I was talking to someone just in the last week, and they said they have a group that from their church that meets and goes bowling, and they chose bowling because they wanted it to be a physical activity, but they didn't want it to be super demanding physically. And while they're at bowling, right, they can have food. People who drink alcohol can drink alcohol, and people who don't can have other things to drink. But it's social, and it's things that for young adults to have a group to go do things with can really help. Um, a monthly dinner works as well, a potluck event. Um, our, a church that I'm very familiar with hosted a roller skating party for families. So they got a lot of people who were in their 40s who had school age children, a lot of people in their 30s and 40s who had school age children, but people who were in their 20s and people who were in their 60s and 70s could all participate. So there was some intergenerational thing happening as well. So you could have a group that plans a monthly social gathering just to build more relationship with people in your community. So I hope these are giving you some ideas of things that you might do in your community. Keep in mind that some of this feels like radical hospitality, like when you're bringing people in and they're visiting, how do you make them feel welcome without overwhelming them? All of it is grounded in having authentic conversations, not just based on the research, but really getting to know what the people who are coming to your community are looking for. All of this is based on what is it that creates or that invites people to be vulnerable and still feel that they are in a safe environment to be themselves. And with young adults, we really, really have to think about the small group experience and how to engage them in leadership in appropriate ways. So these are just some things for you to think about of how you can build a bridge between people simply visiting to attending, and then from attending to being a real part of the community where they begin to feel like this community is their home as well, their spiritual home as well. Even though this is the last Tuesday in July, because I was traveling last week, I am going to do one more session that is focused on more young adults, please. More young adults, please. And so next week, I'm going to talk about the fact that the young adults who are part of your community, they're not just the future of the church. How can we behave that it's clear they are a significant and very valuable part of the church right now? So we'll be talking a little bit about leadership and intergenerational mentoring and a lot of other small topics that add up to our young adults feeling like they are respected and needed in your church. But that's it for today. So I'm going to invite you to join me next Tuesday and every Tuesday at noon Mountain Time right here on the New Thought Media Network. Bye for now.
Thanks for watching The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Join us again next week at 12 noon Mountain Time.